accusingly. He backed slowly away from them, and just before he turned to run, Gilbert offered some advice. "If you run now, we'll delay removing the body or telling anyone what has happened. The coast is but an hour away by fast horse. You may be in Normandy before William's body reaches Winchester. Fly, now!" Walter took off through the leaf litter, leaping over protruding tree roots and around clumps of gorse in his haste to escape. His horse had been tied to a tree further back towards the hunting lodge they had left an hour earlier, and he untied it, leapt into the saddle, and thundered off towards Lymington. He was followed shortly thereafter by Henry, who lost no time in galloping to Winchester and the future that had suddenly opened up before him. Gilbert looked across at his brother Roger and smiled. "Will you take the head or the feet?" "Neither," Roger grinned back. "Henry needs time to reach Winchester, and Walter must be allowed to make good his escape to France. If we leave the bastard here, the foresters may not find him until the boars and foxes have taken their share. By then we could both be in London, where we might be safer lodged." Gilbert was hardly likely to object to this proposal. After all, the man whose body they were abandoning had been, for the past 13 years, King of England. 1. 1074. Sir Wilfrid de Walsingham smiled proudly as his oldest child, Matilda, waved to him from the doorway of the shrine from which she had just emerged, holding the hand of her Aunt Elva. Matilda still called her Aunt Elva since she was her father's sister, but everyone else was required to call her Sister Grace, since she was now in holy orders in the convent of the Holy Sisters of the Blessed Virgin. Even her brother Sir Wilfrid had agreed to address her by the name under which she had been called to God's work, in return for her not lowering the dignity of the lord of the manor by calling him Will. This was the name by which he had been known when they had grown up together in the village of Sandlake, over a week's journey away on the south coast near Pevensey, in the old earldom of Wessex, as it had been called then. "The Holy Lady requires another coat of paint," Matilda shouted up to him. "Could you ask Ralph Builder to make sure that the gold doesn't flake off this time?" "And who is to pay for that?" her father inquired teasingly, but it was his sister, as usual, who had the glib answer she gave to almost every question to do with the shrine. "God will provide, and if he doesn't, the rents are due in at Martinmas, and it's been a good harvest. Since the good Lord has been so benevolent towards his people, the least they can do is pay an extra penny each in order to see his mother's statue restored to its former beauty." Wilfrid waved in acknowledgment of her faith, if not her commercial wisdom, and marvelled again at the swift conversion that had transformed Elva from the spirited creature who had delighted in racing him up and down the path beside the river back in Sandlake. This was where their father's mill had ground the Thane's grain, in the days before William of Normandy's warships had appeared on the coastline below their humble village. Elva had been married to the Thane's second son Selwyn, whose grave she tended daily in her holy vestments. It was only yards away from the shrine itself, down the slope towards the river, where Wilfrid had recently installed a mill of his own for the benefit of his tenants and cotters. Between childhood and widowhood, Elva had borne a child, a boy called Elston, who was barely a year younger than Matilda, or Tilly, as she was known within the family circle. Elston had been absorbed into Wilfrid's household when Elva had taken the veil after her husband's death. Selwyn's body had been brought back to Walsingham draped across his horse, and Elva had, in her own mind, finally received the sign for which she had prayed to the Virgin, asking whether or not her life should be devoted to the service of God. Neither Wilfrid nor Elva had received any Christian education, if one discounted the mumbles of the passing friars, who told unlikely stories in return for food and drink.